Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Rugby World Cup Weekly, our flagship weekly review show of all the action in France, even. Some might say it was a rest week due to some heavy hitters sitting out, but the pools are finally taking shape with just one round to go. Get the calculators ready because the permutations time is starting to take effect. Joining me tonight are Ed Price and Ottavio Arenella, and there will be a chat with Francisco Isaac to talk about Pool C in the middle of the podcast as well. So, firstly, welcome back on, Ed, and welcome to the show, Ottavio.
Oh yeah, how are you?
Hi guys, thank you for having me on.
It's great to have you on as always. And we'll start things off with your own country, Ottavio. It was Friday Night Lights, Italy against New Zealand. We were kind of hopeful that it would be something good, but it was a disappointing one for the Azzurri in the end. What was your thoughts on it overall?
Well, we we crumble under the pressure of this black storm that attack us every time was possible with all the strength they show every time as a world champions, multiple more world champions, one of the best team in the world. We try to fight in the first 15 minutes, let's say, and then scoring those two tries. One from just an exit strategy that hurts because that is like a trademark also of the Italian attack, and that line break from Savea changed everything, and then couple of lineouts. Everything went wrong. Let's say we tried, but they were the best in the field, and fair play. Too many points. Nobody was expecting that, but we have to suck it and go ahead for the next game.
Yeah, no, it was disappointing in that regard. Obviously conceding 90 points isn't great. And I suppose I'll just stick with yourself for a minute, mate, because like a lot of talk beforehand, I had um your Fraternity Rugby podcast co-host on beforehand. We talked about Kieran Crowley and his reign. This I know they could go out and they could pull off a shock against France and get out of the pool, and it would be great. But this certainly seems like a poor mark on his record. If as it is his second last game.
Yeah, that's the something disappointing thing. Also, the way maybe he spoke in the press conference, like, okay, we're gonna just no review on this game, just trying to be. That means that he's leaving because we know Quesada is waiting for the next chapter of Italy development, and so he said, you know what, just leave it there. Let's go ahead and prepare the next one. So that was the only way. It's not the first time we like miss the appointment. Let's see, like Batumi in Georgia, we completely wrong lane of attack, a lot too much kicking game for the 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 strength that we had in the team. So we had a couple of games really bad prepared, but this time wasn't for the preparation. Was the opponent was too good, too strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a pity, as we say, it is a pity. Many people expect a contest. And Ed, I suppose for Italy, it brings up this conversation of the Six Nations place and the tier two games, and it feels tiresome to say the least. But yeah, I suppose the other side of it is you look at games like Fiji, Georgia, like Portugal against Australia, and it just shows that maybe the reason that these blowouts are happening is because these, I don't want to say lesser teams, but lower ranked sides aren't getting enough games against the highest opposition.
Yeah, I think struck me as this particular result was so out of the blue. I mean, I don't think anyone really expected that type of scoreline. And credit to New Zealand, because what tends to happen in those situations once you get to sort of 30, 40 points is you take your foot off the gas and you start to be a bit more conservative, etc. And New Zealand just didn't do that. They just kept going, which is rare. And a game that they'd won, they didn't have to keep going like that. And that's maybe that's a symptom of the fact they had that defeat from against France, and it's a case of we want to really make a point here. But I agree with you. It's tiresome on the whole. Tier two promotion, relegation, Six Nations stuff. I think it's the same arguments again and again. Italy have shown in the last couple of years that they've seemed to have turned a corner. I think, unfortunately, as Ottavio said, that Kieran Crowley's he's clearly, he's at the end of his reign. do the players really want to play for him anymore? They've got a new guy coming in. You get it in football, don't you? Where managers who are going to be, they're going to be leaving. They're going to get sacked, and people down tools. I think probably overall, though, I think it's disappointing because we all felt there was possibly a bit more competitiveness with the Italian side this year. There's some great players in that team. I think probably they could have done with having France or New Zealand in the first couple of games rather than having them back to back at the end, because I think if they were going to cause an upset, it probably would have been catching them cold. Obviously they've got one more chance against France, but on the basis that France haven't properly qualified yet, you can't really see them taking that. It seems unlikely they're gonna slip up, but stranger things happened. But it would,
full strength. They're gonna go full strength. The France team. I don't think they're gonna mix it up too much. Maybe they're gonna bring some good horses from the bench. I can think maybe Makalou for some situation in the second half. But yeah, they're gonna be strong. We're gonna suffer even more because now we brought Bonfiglio in because Fischetti got injured in the games. So, and probably Ferrari can go play on the left side of the scrum instead of being on the right as a tight head. A lot of changes. We don't gonna have Dino Lamb. So let's see Nicotera, other situation with him because he got really almost knocked out tackling Jordi Barrett. So yes, kind of HIA protocol now to follow.
Just before we move off this game, Ottavio, what obviously it's hard to say for certain, but what do you think would be a good result for Italy going into this weekend? What would be acceptable? Because they have to bounce back, but to their credit, they have ran France kind of close in the last few years. They've been a good matchup for Italy.
So the key is going to be the starting properly because we always have some kind of issues in the first half in the game. We suffer a lot. They score a lot of points against us every time. So that is going to be key to be in the game. For me, the key for this team always been the performances. Try to do your best, and then the result is going to come. I hope in a better performance, and probably we're gonna be in the game more time. And I hope if we have to lose, of course, I hope always to win. But if we have to lose, I hope it's gonna be in the last minutes of the game with them really suffering. And I want that performance is gonna help us to end strongly.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll ever hear me say that now, that I'd rather lose at the death. I think I'd rather have it over and done with. But I suppose there's the scars of last weekend and so forth. And another team who got a big loss and certainly didn't lose at the death was Romania. They fell to an 84-0 loss to a Ben Healy-led Scotland side in Pool B. A big win for Scotland, heavily rotated, but realistically, the scorer and the points differential is all you can take away from this game.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say as well is that there's a sort of almost same old Scotland sort of thing where you think they're expected to win comfortably. They have heavily rotated it. We've seen already in the World Cup that club teams, that have heavily rotated have struggled against the minnow nations, the smaller nations. France against Uruguay sort of stands out, and then Australia against Portugal. But I thought actually the way that Scotland went about it was quite impressive. They really, again, a bit like New Zealand, actually, they just never took their foot off the gas. And the last 10 minutes in particular, you thought, oh, hello, hundreds on here, because they were literally every time they got the ball, they were running through massive gaps. Romania were falling off tackles anyway, but there was huge gaps by the end of it. And it's difficult from a Romanian point of view. What do you take from this World Cup? Because I suppose the first minute against Ireland was lovely for them, but then pretty much ever since then it's been dreadful, and they've been well off what's been required. And you sort of compare them against Portugal, Georgia, even Namibia have had moments and have looked competitive at times in their final game against Uruguay. All you can hope really from Romania's point of view is their final game this Sunday against Tonga is competitive for as long as possible. But it's a real shame because Romania are a side and a country that's got a lot of pedigree in rugby union and have been around in the World Cups for, well, I think they've only missed one. So it's a shame, really, because you want them to be competitive. It's just they're nowhere near. And Scotland did really well in taking their chances, in playing some very attractive rugby as well. And I think we've been used to Scotland playing some attractive rugby under Finn Russell. So it's nice for them to have that other option now. Yeah. So if Finn Russell does get injured, which is always the worry, I think from Scotland's point of view, they may be a little bit less concerned that there basically is a guy coming in to play very similar style, albeit probably not as mercurial as Finn.
Yeah, well, one thing about Ben Healy that, you know, I've said before, he's kind of made for international rugby. He's a great passer of the ball, and he's an above 80 to 85% kicker. And realistically, at test level, that's going to win you more games than the dancing of a Libbok or a Marcus Smith. You know, it's just realities of it. We'll come back to Scotland in a minute if you don't mind. I just want to touch on Romania with yourself, Ottavio, because like they've conceded 82, 76, and 84 points in their 3 respective games. They lost to Italy by 50 points and Georgia by 50 points in the warm-ups. They're not in a great place at the moment. Like, again, we don't want to be overreactionary about them at all, but it's not great for a country who has done well at some World Cups to be suffering big losses like that.
They lost some, like, the golden age that they had, like, probably, let's think some names. Marius Tinku was one of the best prop they got for years playing in France. In general, Romania got also this issue with depopulation. A lot of young people is going somewhere else. So maybe if they're lucky, they can start playing rugby and so in other countries. So they have to go look for those players now. They have to do a different recruitment, and all the main teams, except for Baia Mare, are in Bucharest. So you have to follow those guys, maybe get some Italian guys too, because there is a big population of Romanian also player. Actually, one of the number 10 of Romania in the World Cup in South Africa was my former coach in under 16. So there are a lot of people that play rugby that lives in Italy. So maybe go find other players abroad, bring it into the group. Now there is Popescu, is one of the young for the Serie A in Italy. So they have to go picking players and follow a good path of development in the nation, because now really they're struggling. And even Spain was pretty good, and then we know all the issues with passport and stuff happened, but that was the team in theory going better than Romania a certain last couple of years.
Well, with something we'll probably get into as the season goes on is, you know, the Champions Cup and European rugby. And you do wonder if, considering the Champions Cup and Challenge Cup keeps getting stripped of teams due to financial issues, maybe the place is there to bring in a Romanian side along with the Black Lions of Georgia, along with, you know, I know the Cheetahs are South African, and have an extra team like that and give them the chance, give them an opportunity, because eventually if you do build it, they will come, and you hope that that's the case. We'll move back to Scotland now, Ed, because that's where an awful lot of the talk on this podcast is going to be this week, and on these shores. Mention the fact that you can't read too much into them. But one thing I want to talk about is they made wholesale changes for this game, coming off a Tonga game where they were bruised and battered, I will admit. And then in the week off before that, it's a weird strategy, because a lot of coaches are kind of going strong when they can, even in games like this, Ireland in particular. Would you be in favour of that, what Townsend has done?
I think if it had been anyone other than Romania, I would have thought it was a mistake. But clearly Romania are a weak side, and I think you could get away with it, because I think, as we saw, the bonus point was always going to be done very quickly. It was going to be a case of scoring as many points as possible, and I never felt at any point that Romania were going to offer much of a resistance. I think the way that it probably worked out pretty well for Gregor Townsend. I think he's now got a bit of a problem that a lot of players put their hands up for the Ireland game. I'm sure he knows his first 15 and 23 that he wants to pick, but there's a few lads there who've done really good jobs and have really impressed. From a Gloucester point of view, obviously we've got Chris Harris there, and it's amazing because he's one of the best defensive centres in Europe. But what he doesn't have is probably that little bit of extra pace that you need to break the line against someone like Ireland. Against Romania, it's fine, but against Ireland, you probably need something. So I'm expecting him to drop out of the squad for the Romania side. For the Ireland game, and probably we'll see this side that pretty much plays South Africa will play against Ireland. But it's going to be interesting with Ireland because what do Ireland do? You've got you only need a point.
That's
that's
a long story.
It's a very and this is the weird thing, isn't it? Everyone was kind of expecting this sort of moment. It'll be a foregone conclusion. Ireland are going to be they're basically in the quarterfinals, but there's this weird psychological drama now that if Scotland get a couple of tries early, and you'd imagine Scotland are going to have to go hard early on. And do you think that's a sudden psychological drama that Ireland might not have had to think about too much? And yeah, it could be very interesting, could be very entertaining from a neutral's point of view. But yeah.
Well, just to touch on that quickly, because we'll talk about South Africa in a few minutes. Like, there is the case where Scotland can come second with a 4-0 points in the pool kind of scenario, but they haven't done that against Ireland in 20 years. Ireland haven't conceded 4 tries in the game in over 2 years, bar the New Zealand game. Like, the only team that has done it in the last 3 years has been New Zealand and Japan, and one of those was in a Lions year. So there's so many different talking points, but I would assume that both sides are going to go out and they're going to give it everything. There won't be any match fixing, as was kind of put to Jack Nienaber there last night. We will stick with Pool B for now, because Scotland beat Tonga last night, and they're essentially all but assured of their quarterfinal spot, possibly against France, possibly against New Zealand. Italy still in the reckoning. I might just take you through this game and I'll hand it over to you then, because it was the game where Handré Pollard returned, and he was very impressing in his performance. But again, Makasole Mapimpi goes down injured. They only have 2 notable hookers in the squad, and what they do, they call up Lucan Yuan as opposed to a Joseph Dreva. Like, these are the mini dramas that always seem to follow South Africa. The big win, and I think the week off is probably good for them, because France are going to go fairly close to full strength this week, and without Dupont, so he's not going to be leading the team this week, and South Africa can just take a week off, watch them, focus on them, because realistically, they have seen New Zealand enough times. They know how to play New Zealand. They know how to beat them. They've done it already. I'll go to yourself first, Ottavio. Big win for South Africa and all that, but maybe just first on Tonga. I thought it was probably their best performance so far.
Yeah, they were better. Let's say they grow in the last games. They show what they can do. Even maybe I think William Avili play better. Maybe his better game at 10 in this World Cup. Ben Taufi Inua scored a great try, deserved. So really good for them, because from an Italian perspective, also we are all looking for Malakai Fekito, how he's playing for next year in Benetton, and that exciting for all the Italian movement. Let's say he's one of the star, literally coming in Italy to play, and that's awesome for us. Tonga can grow, but it need in general different option for the future. Augustin Pulu, yes, he's bring a lot of competence, leadership, but they need something different. For example, for me, it's at scrum half, and they have to grow more, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unlikely now that they'll qualify for the next World Cup through this one, because of the fact that Scotland have 2 wins. I think they can't. They can't even get thirds. They're going to have to regroup and go again. And now, I think the last 2 years for them was kind of, let's get the band back together, per se, and get Fekitoa. Falau didn't make the World Cup. Piatoa, I thought, had a good World Cup to his credit. Peter Aki, get all these guys in the field and see if it works. Now it's about moving on and seeing what they can do in 2027, and hopefully they improve. South Africa, as we said, is kind of an enigma in their own way. You know, when they're winning, they're losing. When they're losing, they're winning. It's kind of this whole charade around them. Heading into the quarterfinals now, which it looks like they will. Kevin Miller on Twitter went through the permutations. It's literally like a 1 in 20 chance
Yeah.
on just purely results that they don't make it. That's before you take in the fact that, you know, Scotland would have to get a bonus point against Ireland and all that thing. How do you think they're faring up going into it?
I have this sneaking suspicion they've been a little bit too clever for their own good, and I think it's going to come crashing down the quarterfinals. I had them as we went into the World Cup. I thought absolutely, probably joint favourites with Ireland, really, and it was going to be a case of maybe whoever won that game would probably then end up being favourites. But I think they just keep making these weird decisions around selecting replacements for injuries, and I've just got a funny feeling it's going to go horribly wrong for them, which normally means they'll win the World Cup. But that's just, you know, the way that it always happens when I predict anything. I think if they were going to prefer a team to play against, I think they'd probably prefer New Zealand. I think New Zealand are certainly less of a surprise. I think South Africa know they can bully them up front and so that's why I think they prefer them. I think they could still beat France, but if you were ironically, if you're a South African coach or player, you probably would like New Zealand instead, which would then require a Scotland win, but not enough that then puts them. Yeah, it's all within wonderful. I think Ireland will end up winning anyway, and it'll all come to now, and South Africa will be playing France. But yeah, it's a very intriguing final weekend for South Africa, because they kind of have to have a week off, have a rest, and then they'll have another week to prepare on who they're going to play. Whereas England, for example, we kind of know we're playing Fiji, you know, and Wales know they're going to play one of Argentina or Japan, so that it's nice and easy, probably Argentina. So it's a little bit different for other teams, whereas South Africa are not absolutely 100% sure at this point.
Absolutely. Just before we move off Pool B, Ottavio, same question to you. What have you made of South Africa so far?
South Africa, I agree with that about that's weird, the way they manage all this situation now, bringing Lucanio Am. You don't know how fit he is. They move different kind of moody at 13 to wait. Now let's see the conundrum about the number 11, if he's gonna be like a fresh kind of moody, or they're gonna bring in Cheslin Kolbe from there, or they're gonna move somebody else. And then there is the situation, of course, with Deon Fury or Du Toit behind the only one available now, a real hooker in the squad. So Joseph Tuefa seems not to be the first choice, neither the fourth, the fifth choice of Rassi Erasmus and Jacques Ninaber, which is weird. They go in this way. Can be karma. Who knows what's gonna happen? But yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, well, the old sayings are, you know, no set. If you don't have a set piece, you can't win in test level rugby, and it could come back to bite them. Like Marco van Staden and Dion Ferry are fine players, but they've played flanker all year, and now they might be tasked with being a replacement hooker in the World Cup quarterfinal or final or whatever, and we'll wait and see. So that's Pool B covered, and I will move on to Pool C next. Francisco Isaac joins me to talk about that. So that was a really good, always great having Francisco on, and like all our guests, great getting that kind of external perspective as instead of being this Irish box as always. Move on now to Pool D, which is where England have already qualified, but there's still plenty to play for there. We'll start with the South American Derby, the first one in Rugby World Cup history, believe it or not, at the weekend, as Argentina ran out convincing for 59-5 winners in a lopsided contest. Ottavio, I'll come to you first here. Argentina have a shootout with Japan to come. What have you made of them, first of all, and what do you make of them at the weekend?
Look, Argentina is living a weird World Cup, let's say, because the first game I was in Marseille watching the game, and it was crazy the way like they let's say almost give up with ideas in the field and in the fight. So that was different. Now we saw against Chile that wants to fight, but Argentina was really good with Kubelli and Nicol Sanchez. Those two guys still work really well together. Probably they're gonna put some question mark in Chega decision for the next game, the key game, and maybe they're gonna start with Nico Sanchez bringing points, bringing experience in a tough game instead of Santi Carreras, which I love as a Gloucester supporter, a fan from Italy. Yes, I love him, but probably this is not the game he has to start there. Maybe he can start fullback. Can be a different option for the kicking game during this game against Japan. But Argentina was really sharp in this game. They did well. Isa is one of the best players they are now unleashing. Facundo Isa, which is a machine at Toulon. And in the moment he left the field, he went into bench. That was the moment they get more chance, Chile. So that probably is also connected to what he can do in the field, tackling or carrying the ball. So Argentina pretty confident now, but it's always Argentina. Passion Latinos like somebody else, and let's see. It's gonna be tough, a tough game because you never know against a team like Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ed, you're an England fan. You've followed them through this World Cup. They've played Argentina and Japan. We'll just stick on Argentina for a minute. Talk about Japan small later on, because that first game was just a complete no-show. You could almost write it off as just not being at the race at all against England. They had a week off, and then they play out this dire contest with Samoa. They hammer Chile in a 100% a one-horse race, and it feels like now this is the first game in a month now, essentially, where we're actually looking at Argentina and saying, what do they have? Because we're no clearer to know.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, that first game, as you quite rightly say, it was such a weird game because as an Englishman thinking we were all going in with, shall we say, negative expectations. I think we spoke before the World Cup and it was, I genuinely thought we'd lose that game. And after 35 minutes, you're like, well, going into half time, unless England did something ridiculously stupid, which they didn't for the first time in a long time, we were like, oh, well, we've won this game. This is remarkable. And I did think, wow, what psychological damage is that going to do to Argentina? I think they've done well in terms of that. I think they probably needed that really gritty, hard-fought performance against Samoa. It wasn't pretty by any way, save for the imagination, but just winning that game was just everything. And then obviously, yeah, Chile, they had a great start against Japan, and they've obviously tapered off because they're not used to this level of intensity at a World Cup. It's the first World Cup. They're not used to playing these standard teams, so they've obviously fallen away. But I do think Argentina have got. It's weird because they've got more than enough to beat Japan, and if they're playing Wales, they've got more than enough to beat Wales because Wales are a very average side in a very competitive group, but they're not paid, they're not been amazing apart from a great win against Australia. So I could see Argentina, I should say, if they put a game against together, a performance together, yeah, you could see them beating Wales in a quarterfinal. It's very, very doable, and it's definite possibility. I agree with Ottavio, 100% start with Nicolas Sanchez at 10. I mean, say as a Gloucester fan as well, we really love Santi, but we all think, most Gloucester fans, 90% of Gloucester fans, see him as a fullback. He reads the game so beautifully. He's so good under the high ball. He can cut lines, and he has more time. And a player like that, I think, give him more time, as much time as possible, and he can make a big difference.
It'd be interesting to see what way Checker goes, because it's been something we talked about in this podcast. He's chopped and changed so much that it feels like it's been to their detriment. If he does it again, even though it might feel like bigger picture, it could be better for them, there is also that kind of slight down mark in the cohesion stakes as well. Before we move off them, might just chat about England here for a minute, because you're supposed to be on last week, Ed, so might just take the opportunity now. It's not your fault. It's entirely
No,
French
it was
transport.
entirely for French transport system, which
Yeah,
we have the
yeah,
benefit of.
it's not the first or last time that it's going to happen in this World Cup. I can assure you that. Like England are already through. They bet Argentina when Argentina were poor. The Japan game is probably the best one to look out at
Mm.
because Japan did perform. Like if they have 3 or 4 less knock-ons, it's a one-score game. Like that was the killer for them. England plays Samoa now at the weekend, and Samoa have been very disappointing. So, from an English point of view, obviously you said you were quite negative and downbeat after the Ireland game in the warm-ups. On this podcast, where are you now? Where do you think they are heading into the quarterfinals and final pool game and then quarterfinals?
We can't. I did touch on it when we spoke before the start of the World Cup in the daft thing that England, the side of the draw we're on, that we could afford to make a mistake. We haven't, but we could afford to make a mistake and still qualify. And the Japan game felt like the mistake was just waiting to happen. That was probably the more dangerous one, because you then go, oh Christ, we've now got to definitely beat Samoa and all of the added pressure. I look at it now and see England. We're in the quarterfinals. We've topped the pool. No matter what happens against Samoa, we'll probably. I wouldn't be surprised actually if we play a relative or nearly full strength side against Samoa, because of the fact we played Chile. We've had a week off, and then we've got the quarterfinals. I would expect Borthwick to go pretty full. What will be intriguing, though, and it's been kind of already commented on in the press, is whether he brings Farrell back. Personally, I wouldn't. I probably would still keep him on the bench, because he's not, the player forward has been the best 10. And I think it's every time we put Farrell in a centre, it really disturbs the whole flow of the side. And you can't take Chile as an example of how the back line could move, because it's a different. To be honest, we've got to be respectful but honest. They're not going to be a concern from a defensive point of view if you're England. I think it looked quite an exciting backline with Arundel on the pitch. I'd probably have him in over May, just for the additional pace and his elusiveness. And I think the only thing is he's going to bring Curry back, almost certainly, because he hasn't had any game time and you need to play him. I would expect England to win, probably with a bonus point, and then we're going to go into the quarterfinals with really a very high chance of getting through. I know Fiji beat England in the pre-World Cup warm-ups, but it's a very different experience for Fiji. The injuries, there's a few little niggles, suspensions possibly. I have a feeling that they're going to be knackered, and I think England will be more rested. And I think that's where I said in our pod, but in the pod before the World Cup, that England are going to get to the semi-final probably without playing much rugby, and Ireland could be knocked out. And that's how stupid the World Cup is in terms of its format this year. But that's where we are with it.
Yeah, not playing much rugby has kind of been the theme of it, all right, as well, because we've kind of had a joke between myself and a few mates and in groups, like, if it is England against Wales in the quarterfinal, I think that's the one that that's the one you take off. That's the one you don't have to watch, because you're not going to miss a lot apart from the scoreline. And I'm not saying that to be rude. It's just the way that they've played. They've been pragmatic, to say the least.
Yeah.
I'll come back to yourself for the final game in Pool D, Ed. Probably one of the games of the weekend between Japan and Samoa. It was really enjoyable, actually. With an eye to next weekend, we'll get onto that with Japan and possibly get out of the pool. But just first of all, what do you make of it as a contest? Probably Samoa's best performance and Japan's best performance.
Yeah, Japan first 60 minutes were excellent. I thought, and I got proper geeky into how they were defending rucks as well, and the lads I'm on the podcast with were. Yeah, they got very bored very quickly. But it was really interesting to see how Japan went about it. They clearly were targeting Samoa, kind of overcommitting at rucks, and then just basically picking them off one by one until about 50, 60 minutes. And then Samoa worked out maybe stop getting people red carded and yellow carded. That will be a really good start from their World Cup. But what was again interesting was how Samoa worked out the best solution. We'll just go pick and drive. And that last 20 minutes, you suddenly thought, ooh, this could get very interesting if Samoa can just keep hold of the ball. But Japan just had enough around the fringes. They had enough. I think the try, the Leach try, I think obviously was the killer. But I don't know. Japan are a weird team because they have these little flits and starts in games, and they look like they were from 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then they'll just have an absolute brain fart and do something really stupid, or they'll start almost playing within themselves and start, kicking the ball away too much. And I don't think their game management and the systems they've got in place, specifically around kick chase, are good enough to kick the ball as much as they have been. And that was what their undoing was against England. That's what nearly was the undoing against Samoa, because Samoa just stopped dropping the ball. And yeah, it was a really entertaining game. I think there was a few this weekend, which, as we kind of said, that all the big boys were off. All the big matchups weren't on this weekend, but there were some really entertaining games, and that was one of them. I did feel for Samoa at the end, because I thought despite all of the ill discipline, they still have a very good side there, and it's just a case of they've let themselves down with some very, very poor tackling technique and some poor decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And TV, I was going to get into it anyway, but Ed went that way as well. Japan probably looked closest than they have to 2019 form in this game than they have in most of their games since 2019. Like there's been moments where you see them attacking, and it just, maybe it's the Irish eye because we got beaten by them in 2019, but you just go straight back, and the enjoyment and the free flowing game they play. Obviously, Jamie Joseph is leaving, and that's for probably maybe another day's conversation, but even though we kind of all wrote them off, they're still in with a huge chance here and playing their best rugby in a while.
And they have also another good coach, and maybe he's gonna prepare some good tricks, which is Tony Brown, for the line out set piece all around there.
Yeah.
Is gonna be interesting against Argentina, who's gonna be smart in that area of the field. But man, Japan looks more, as usual, extra resilient, ready to fight, ready to play the same way they want to play since minute 1 to the end of the game. They never gonna change. They don't give up, which is one of the other great things about this game. And as you said, yeah, sometimes they are not that team that you were expecting. Think about also the game against Italy. They were so bad with the kicking the ball everywhere, and then now Matsuda got for a couple of games 100% accuracy. So where is the real Japan? I think the real Japan is coming. It's ready to fight for the game. Probably they pinpoint as the crucial one in the next round. So it's gonna be really interesting. They have these players always. The commitment is huge, and the style, the way they want to play, move the ball really close to the to the defensive line, being always ready to give option to the ball carrier. It's amazing, and that is the entertaining part of this team that can bring upsetting results, as we know.
Absolutely. Could well go that way. With Ed, I'll just finish with yourself. Argentina on 9 points, Japan on 9 points. Winner is going through unless there's freak results and there's a draw and Samoa beat you with a bonus point, and in which case I don't even want to go through the permutations for that as well. Realistically, Japan or Argentina, one of them is going through on Saturday. I believe that game is. Not 100% sure. Which way do you see it going?
I think because Japan struggle against pragmatic sides, I think Argentina probably will be a bit more pragmatic, and they will probably try to play a kind of forward-dominated attritional game. And I think Japan will struggle. They're going to have to take all their chances at that point, Japan. They're just going to have to basically sling it wide, use that exceptional pace from the 9 and 10 that they've got, and if they can take their chances and put pressure on Argentina and sort of get that scoreboard ticking, like England did, we've seen the mental fragility of Argentina. But if Argentina can just keep grinding away, keep Japan sort of a bit, again, like England did to Japan, I suppose, just keeping that scoreboard pressure on Japan, I would think Argentina would have enough. I think they've got enough star quality in their squad. They've got a little bit more depth to probably push them over the line. I'm going to caveat it by saying if Japan get an early lead and say 10, 15 points up, I'd probably say Japan are going to maybe going to sneak it. But it's my gut, my heart, and what I'd like to see is Japan get through, because I love the way they play, because it's so exciting and it's so attractive. And I love their innovation around lineouts and rucks and things like that. But my head is Argentina.
Understandable. Ottavio, in a quick word, which way do you say go?
Well, I love both. I love both. So I'm going with Argentina, just because I want to see what can happen after with this crazy team that is Argentina. So I'm going there, but I think, as Ed said, straight lines, attacking for straight lines, going with the huge work of the forwards, Kremer, Madera, and everywhere, keeping the team narrow, and then move this ball wide and fast. They can do some damage to Japan, but if they take the lead, it's gonna be another game, because the emotion is there. Let's see. I'm going with Argentina anyway.
Yeah, I'll just say Japan, just so we have someone on the record saying Japan. Why not? We'll close things out in Pool A now. Uruguay took on Namibia in midweek. It was Wednesday. I don't have it written down here. 36-26 contest. Really, really enjoyable. Uruguay have been, I don't know what to say about them. Some of the best games of the tournament have involved Uruguay so far. And like, even at that, Namibia probably had one of their best World Cup performances. Like, they were 20-12 up at half time, and they'll feel like they let it slip. Discipline was a big one, as has been for a lot of teams. A lot of the fourth and fifth ranked teams in each pool. Discipline has been a major factor. Ottavio, I'll just come to you real quickly on this one before we leave it. A good performance from Namibia. Uruguay bounced back from their defeat to Italy. I think both sides be relatively happy with how this went.
Yeah, for the potential they have in general, like Namibia, they fight without players. They still fight. Alistair Coetzee used to play for coach in Italy last year with Rovigo, for example. But Uruguay, yes, they fight, but they never had chance to face big team in the last 4 years. So they focus on the game against us, and now they get anyway the victory. So I hope to see more Uruguay games with big guns, and the same for Namibia. That is gonna help them develop, because they need it. Uruguay play only against us twice, because we play with Italy A with the second team. If not, they never play against Argentina, Georgia, or other team like that. They play against Namibia in August to get ready, in Chile. But you
No,
want
and
to play?
it's not great preparation, realistically. I understand it helps them get the job done against Namibia, but in the long term, if they want to see the game get better and improve and get more games like these between very good teams ranked, outside the top 20 in the world, and we need to help them. We need to help them get there. Ed, what more can you add apart from just really, really good game in Uruguay? Yeah, they didn't have the heroics of 2019, but they certainly haven't hid away from any challenge in this tournament.
No, Uruguay are it's a close one between Uruguay and Portugal for my new favourite tier 2 team.
Understandable.
I'm going to say Uruguay because they've got better away shirts. Their sort of goldy orange shirt is my absolute favourite shirt of the World Cup. But you can't get it anywhere. I've looked, unless I want to try and get it sort of shipped from Montevideo, and I don't fancy the shipping costs. So yeah, it's just brilliant, and it's what I think. The more that people can watch these teams, I mean, I think you mentioned what can we do? What could we do to sort of help Uruguay? And my sort of theory is this: look, you get a Lions tour every mid World Cup cycle. And normally what happens is England go on a little tour down to Argentina. Can't we do an extra tour? Or one of the home nations does that. Bolt on a couple of tests against Uruguay.
Yeah.
To me, that would be a far more enjoyable and useful test for the wider squad, and also for Uruguay. It gets an opportunity to play against one of the big teams at home as well. And you think how much that's going to mean to the Uruguayan rugby population and South American rugby in general.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be great. And something I spoke on my Twitter during the week as well, that you take a Lions tour year, for example, and you get the odd games. So say New Zealand might have, France or whatever. It's like, why can't we have Wales going to South America and Ireland go to the Pacific Island nations and England go to Japan and so on, and spread it out? Like, it's a stepping stone then. I know it'd be great if they brought them in for the Autumn Nation series, but now that that's kind of centrally organized, that's just not going to happen. That's the reality of it now. It's a pity, because it's a case of money talks in that regard. Lads, been really good talking to you, and we will have conversations about the state of the game, tier 2 nations, and so on and so forth across the season and the direction this podcast will be going in. But for now, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. For those at home, I will be back on Thursday and Sunday, I believe, with the respective preview and recap podcasts of Ireland against Scotland, a mini knockout game in the pool stages, which takes place Saturday night. That is on Saturday at 8 p.m. And we will have our final pool stage recap on Monday as well. So, as always, thanks home to everyone for listening. If you like what you see or hear, always please do subscribe and leave a review and share and tell a friend. It makes all the difference. You can find the links for our guests, Ottavio and Ed's Twitter pages down below, as well as their respective podcasts, and for my own social media. But for now, and until next time, take it easy.